The smell of gasoline and scorched asphalt still clung to my clothes as I stumbled out of what remained of my work truck. The collision had been violent, unavoidable, a moment of chaos and terror condensed into a few unbearable seconds. My hands were still trembling, my pulse stubbornly fast, but beneath the shock, a strange clarity settled over me. This wasn't just about a wrecked truck, it was about everything I'd been letting happen in my life, the weight of other people's selfish choices, the endless giving without thought for myself. Caleb's voice echoed in my mind, the constant pretense of stress over some supposed delivery deadline. I'd swallowed his worry hook, line, and sinker, believing that my loyalty, my resources, my time, had purpose in helping him. And now, surrounded by twisted metal and shattered glass, I realized that the real problem had never been the deadlines or the cargo. The problem had been him, and the people closest to me who had allowed this deception to continue. I went home that night with a sense of unease I couldn't shake. There was a nagging thought, a piece of intuition that refused to leave me alone. The next morning, I found myself in the office, going through paperwork I had ignored before. My hand stopped over an envelope that Caleb had left, supposedly routine forms for shipment logs. But something about the way it was shoved into my desk made me pause. I opened it, expecting the mundane, the ordinary. Inside, I found something entirely different. Detailed medical records from a specialist clinic. High-risk pregnancies, twins listed, meticulous notes. My stomach dropped. I recognized the name immediately, Amelia. My younger sister. And then my eyes fell on the line that made the world tilt beneath me. Caleb's name, listed as the father. I sank into the chair, the papers trembling in my hands. Shock wasn't even enough to describe what I felt. Betrayal, yes.
But this was larger than that.
This was a betrayal that combined deceit, family, and a life-altering secret. The high-stakes delivery Caleb had been obsessing over wasn't some cargo or shipment. It was the imminent birth of his children with my own sister. My sister. The absurdity of it twisted my stomach into knots. How had I not seen this? The signs had been there, the lies thinly veiled, but I had been too loyal, too trusting, too willing to sacrifice my own clarity for someone else's convenience. My rebirth began right there in that chair, surrounded by files I had never imagined I'd need to confront. I realized then that my path forward had to be deliberate. I could no longer allow Caleb to exploit my trust, my resources, or my goodwill. I needed to reclaim my life, cut away the drama, and build something unshakable from the wreckage. And I knew exactly who I could turn to: Owen, Caleb's estranged brother. The one person whose loyalty and judgment I could trust implicitly. The shock, the pain, the rage, it all fueled me. I was reborn. And this time, I would navigate the fallout on my own terms. The adrenaline from the accident had faded, but the weight of the discovery pressed down harder than any physical pain. I kept replaying the image of those medical records, Caleb's name next to my sister's, the tiny words confirming twins. My mind couldn't stop twisting the implications. This wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was seismic, affecting family, trust, and the fragile balance of loyalty I had tried to maintain. I kept thinking about all the times Caleb had leaned on me, asking for help with deliveries, excuses, and favors. I had believed it was work, responsibility, a partnership. But now it was painfully clear. Every deadline, every request, every small sacrifice I made had been a cover for something I had never imagined. He had been living another life while pretending to depend on mine. And Amelia, my own sister, someone I loved, had allowed it, or perhaps even orchestrated it in secret. The thought made me ache in ways I couldn't put into words. Family was supposed to be a safe harbor, a place where secrets didn't fester and betrayals didn't grow into mountains. Yet here I was, sitting among the wreckage of my trust, my career, and my assumptions about the people closest to me. The sheer audacity of their deception was almost too much to bear.
Twins.
A high-risk pregnancy. And Caleb, as calm and self-assured as ever, had managed to keep this entire life hidden from me. I spent the morning pacing, trying to untangle what to do first. My gut kept returning to Owen. He had always been different, ethical, incisive, protective in ways that Caleb never understood. The estranged brother had always questioned Caleb's shortcuts, his manipulation, and his tendency to put ambition above honesty. Owen had the insight and the means to help me navigate the tangled web that Caleb and Amelia had spun. I needed him, now more than ever. I reached for my phone, hesitated, then dialed. Each ring felt like a heartbeat echoing through the chaos of my mind. When Owen answered, calm and perceptive as ever, I could barely form the words. But once I began explaining the records, the twins, Caleb's ongoing deception, he listened, the lines around his eyes tightening with focus. I thought I knew him, I said finally, voice trembling. I thought I was helping. I was blind. You weren't blind, Owen replied steadily. You were loyal. That's different. And now you're not. We'll fix this, legally, professionally, ethically. You're not doing this alone. For the first time since discovering the records, a spark of relief ignited. Owen's presence, even over the phone, gave me a grounding sense of purpose. This wasn't just about exposing Caleb, it was about reclaiming my life, my agency, and my peace of mind. I would no longer allow my trust, my resources, or my goodwill to be exploited by deceit. We began outlining a plan, careful and deliberate. Owen would investigate Caleb's dispatch and operational practices, focusing on any irregularities that the affair might have influenced. I would document everything I knew and everything I could gather. Together, we would untangle the web, expose the unethical behaviors, and ensure that Caleb couldn't harm anyone else, especially me. By the end of the day, I realized something profound. The betrayal, while devastating, had ignited my rebirth. I was no longer a passive participant in their schemes. I was active, decisive, and fiercely determined. And I wasn't alone. The weight of the betrayal had settled into a cold, sharp clarity. Each thought of Caleb and Amelia's deceit fueled a quiet fire in me. I couldn't undo the past, but I could control how I responded to it, how I reclaimed my life, and how I ensured they would face the consequences of their recklessness. I began with Caleb's operations. The pattern was subtle but telling: irregular delivery logs, minor miscalculations that had never bothered me before, and repeated reliance on me to cover gaps. Now, with Owen's guidance, I started connecting the dots. Every instance of Caleb leaning on my trust was no longer just a convenience. It was evidence of manipulation. I carefully documented each anomaly, noting the context, the dates, and the way he had leveraged my loyalty to facilitate his hidden life with Amelia. Meanwhile, my thoughts kept returning to my sister. The discovery of her pregnancy, twins no less, had shaken me, but I also understood the nuance. She wasn't entirely innocent. The secrecy implied awareness and complicity. It was a painful realization, but one that reinforced my determination to maintain my own integrity. I refused to allow myself to be emotionally manipulated further. Amelia's choices were hers, and Caleb's were his, but I would not be collateral damage. Owen proved invaluable. He knew exactly where to focus, which financial records to request, and which operational procedures could reveal discrepancies that Caleb had assumed no one would notice. His approach was meticulous and ethical, no assumptions, only verifiable evidence. Watching him work, I felt a growing sense of trust, admiration, and yes, something more. His intensity, his unwavering focus, and his quiet protectiveness sparked feelings I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. It wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal, grounding me amidst the chaos. Over the next few days, we uncovered a series of irregularities in Caleb's dispatch reports. Certain shipments had been logged incorrectly, while others had been accelerated, in ways that benefited his hidden personal life rather than the company. The evidence was subtle but damning, patterns of deceit masked by the facade of professionalism. Each file I examined, each discrepancy Owen highlighted, reinforced the narrative I needed to bring to light. At night, when the work was done, Owen and I would debrief quietly, our conversations mixing strategy with quiet moments of personal connection. It was in these spaces, away from the scrutiny of the office and the prying eyes of family, that I began to feel something I had long denied myself. The calm, protective presence of Owen was a stark contrast to the chaos Caleb had brought into my life. I realized that my rebirth wasn't just about exposure and justice. It was also about love, trust, and choosing someone who would honor both my heart and my integrity. By the end of the week, we had compiled a comprehensive file of evidence: operational irregularities, communication logs, and documented examples of Caleb's manipulation. I felt a sense of empowerment I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't just reacting to betrayal. I was shaping the consequences, reclaiming control over my life, and preparing to sever the ties that had bound me to toxicity. As I reviewed the final documents, I looked over at Owen, his quiet confidence filling the room. For the first time in a long time, I felt both ready and protected. Together, we were unstoppable. The moment had finally come. With the evidence compiled, verified, and meticulously organized, it was time to confront the consequences of Caleb's actions. I had rehearsed in my mind every possible outcome: denial, anger, manipulation, and yet nothing could have fully prepared me for the intensity of the reality. Caleb had always carried himself with an air of calculated confidence, a belief that his schemes would go unnoticed. But as Owen and I stepped into the office with the files in hand, that confidence faltered. His eyes darted between us, attempting to mask the panic, but the tremor in his jaw betrayed him. I felt a cold satisfaction. Not vengeance, not malice, just clarity. I had survived his deceit, and now I was reclaiming control over my life. The conversation was brief. I presented the discrepancies in his dispatch records, the evidence of manipulation, and the undeniable proof of the personal life he had hidden behind the veil of professionalism. Each document landed like a weight, and I watched him shift, unable to summon his usual composure. Amelia's betrayal, too, hung in the air. The knowledge of her complicity wasn't something I needed to argue. It was self-evident in the timing, the secrecy, and the meticulous concealment of her pregnancy. Caleb attempted to justify, to rationalize, to distract. But I was no longer the person who had been blind to manipulation. I had rebuilt my awareness, sharpened my boundaries, and fortified my resolve. With Owen at my side, the confrontation was grounded, precise, and unwavering. Each word we spoke emphasized truth, responsibility, and the consequences of deception. In that room, I realized how much I had grown since the collision, since the moment my world had been forced to halt. The pain, the shock, and the betrayal had been catalysts, shaping me into someone who no longer tolerated instability or emotional manipulation. I could see clearly now that my loyalty was a tool, not a weakness, and I could choose how to wield it. The fallout was immediate. Caleb's position in the company became untenable. The discrepancies we documented, combined with his evident betrayal, forced management to act swiftly. His termination was not just professional, it was symbolic, a public acknowledgement of the manipulations that had quietly undermined trust and integrity. Amelia, too, faced the personal consequences of her choices, and while it pained me to watch her stumble, I remained resolute. My path forward was separate, independent, and free from the shadows of their deceit. Through it all, Owen remained steady, protective without overstepping, firm without being harsh. His presence reminded me that not all alliances were toxic, not all love was deceptive, and not all loyalty could be exploited. I began to see a future where trust and affection could coexist with strength and independence. By the end of the day, I felt a sense of closure. The confrontation had been cathartic, necessary, and empowering. I was no longer a bystander in my own life. I was the architect of my destiny, surrounded by those who genuinely respected me. And for the first time since the accident, I felt the exhilaration of true rebirth, clear, determined, and ready to embrace a life unbound by betrayal. The day after confronting Caleb, I woke with a sense of purpose that was almost unfamiliar. The fog of betrayal had lifted, leaving behind a sharp awareness of what I deserved and what I would no longer tolerate. My work truck might have been destroyed, but the destruction had cleared the path for me to rebuild my life on my own terms. No longer would I allow Caleb or anyone else to manipulate my goodwill or drain my energy. Owen and I spent the morning finalizing the steps to protect my professional and personal interests. With his guidance, I set up measures to ensure Caleb could no longer access company resources through me, documented every transaction, and revised operational protocols to secure my work. Each action felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been slowly eroded by trust misused. It wasn't just about legality or professional safety. It was about my right to live a life unburdened by deception and manipulation. Amid the practicalities, Owen remained my steady anchor. His calm efficiency and unwavering support were a balm to my frayed nerves. Watching him work, strategic, careful, uncompromising, made me realize something I hadn't dared to admit before. I felt a pull toward him that went beyond gratitude. There was a quiet intimacy in the way he understood my boundaries, respected my strength, and offered protection without diminishing my autonomy. In the evening, we reviewed the final documents together. I noticed how naturally our hands brushed as we passed files back and forth, how our eyes met in moments of shared understanding, and how comfortable silence felt when we worked side by side. A warmth began to build between us, subtle but undeniable. It was a different kind of connection than I had ever experienced, one rooted in mutual respect, shared purpose, and unspoken trust. By midweek, the company had taken formal action. Caleb was removed from all responsibilities tied to operations, his misconduct thoroughly documented and addressed. Amelia, too, faced her own reckoning. Watching the consequences unfold, I felt neither glee nor malice, only the quiet satisfaction of justice, tempered by the awareness that life had to move forward. I had claimed my independence, and nothing could take it from me. That night, Owen and I walked along the quiet streets near the office. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement, reflecting a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. He fell into step beside me naturally, no words needed, and I realized just how much his presence mattered. He wasn't there to fix me or rescue me. He was there as an equal, a partner, a man whose loyalty was earned and given freely. As I glanced at him, I felt a tentative thrill. I was no longer bound by Caleb's deceit, no longer controlled by familial entanglements, no longer afraid to reclaim my life. And in that moment, I understood that my rebirth wasn't only about independence. It was about the possibility of love that was genuine, respectful, and safe. Owen smiled softly at me, a subtle question in his eyes. I returned it, a silent acknowledgement that something new, something profound, was beginning. Amid the chaos of betrayal and exposure, I had found clarity, stability, and the first glimmer of a love I could finally trust. The days that followed felt surreal, a mixture of lingering tension from the fallout and a quiet, budding hope for what was to come. With Caleb removed from operations and Amelia facing the consequences of her choices, the air around me began to clear. For the first time in months, I felt free to breathe, to plan, and to explore the life I wanted to lead without interference. Owen became more than just an ally in logistics and legal strategy. His presence was calming yet electrifying, a rare combination that made my heart race while simultaneously giving me a sense of safety I had never known. We started spending more time together outside the confines of the office, sometimes over coffee, sometimes during quiet walks discussing work strategies. And yet, there was an undercurrent, subtle touches, lingering glances, small moments of laughter, that suggested this partnership was evolving into something far deeper. One evening, after finalizing a particularly complicated set of operational adjustments to prevent any future manipulation by Caleb, we stayed behind to organize the office. The light from the street lamps spilled through the large windows, casting a warm glow over stacks of files and scattered paperwork. I felt a quiet sense of contentment, an intimate comfort that was new and unfamiliar. Owen leaned against the desk, watching me work, his eyes soft yet attentive. There was something in the way he looked at me that made me pause, a silent acknowledgement of the trust, gratitude, and unspoken bond between us. I felt a warmth in my chest that wasn't fear, wasn't anxiety. It was recognition of something profound, something genuine. "I can't imagine anyone else handling this as well as you," he said quietly, his voice low and sincere. "You've navigated all of this with clarity, strength, and grace. I've never met anyone like you." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from the sincerity of his words. For so long, my energy had been drained by betrayal, manipulation, and deceit. And now, Owen was giving me something I hadn't realized I'd been longing for: recognition, partnership, and the subtle, intoxicating beginnings of attraction. Over the next few weeks, our connection deepened. We shared dinners under soft lighting, walks along quiet streets, and long conversations that ranged from the mundane to the profoundly personal. Each interaction revealed new layers of trust, humor, and compatibility. I noticed the small ways he anticipated my needs, the way he respected my space, while remaining close enough to provide comfort. It was intoxicating to feel understood, seen, and valued in a way I had never experienced with Caleb. Even amidst the lingering tension of family fallout, I began to allow myself to imagine a future with Owen, a life where loyalty, respect, and love coexisted. His unwavering support reminded me that life could be rebuilt with care, that trust could be earned and cherished, and that intimacy could flourish in an environment free from manipulation and deceit. For the first time since the accident, I allowed myself to dream, to imagine not just surviving, but thriving, alongside someone who cherished me as fiercely as I cherished him. In Owen, I saw not only a protector but a partner, and the possibility of a love that could finally endure without compromise. The final steps of untangling myself from Caleb's manipulation felt both cathartic and surreal. With Owen at my side, we methodically ensured that all loose ends were addressed. Legal measures were finalized to protect my professional assets, and operational safeguards were put in place to prevent any further misuse of my trust. I could finally see the boundaries of my life clearly, no longer obscured by deceit or fear. The confrontation had been decisive, but the aftermath required finesse. Caleb's influence had seeped into small corners of the company and my personal network, subtle yet significant. Owen worked tirelessly, combing through contracts, communications, and records to ensure there was nothing left unchecked. I marveled at his precision, his unwavering commitment to justice, and the way he balanced professionalism with care. As the last pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I felt a profound sense of release. Each document filed, each disclosure made, and each safeguard implemented was a symbolic severing of the ties that had bound me to betrayal. I realized that reclaiming my life wasn't just about exposing Caleb, it was about solidifying my own agency, my own sense of worth, and the kind of life I wanted to lead. Amid the intensity of these final steps, my relationship with Owen evolved naturally, almost effortlessly. The professional partnership had deepened into intimacy, subtle gestures, stolen glances, shared smiles, moments that spoke volumes without words. Our trust had been forged in fire, tempered by shared purpose, and the ease of our companionship only strengthened the bond. One evening, after the last legal documents had been submitted, Owen and I walked along a quiet street near the office. The air was crisp, the city lights reflecting softly on the pavement. He reached out, taking my hand with gentle assurance. I felt a shiver of warmth and comfort, a reminder that love could exist alongside independence, that trust could be both earned and freely given. "Zia," he said softly, turning to face me, "we've handled the chaos, but I want you to know, I'm not just here for this battle. I'm here for you, your life, your future, your heart." I felt my chest tighten with emotion. All the betrayal, all the shock, all the pain that Caleb and Amelia had inflicted seemed to fade in that single moment. I realized I had not only survived the storm, but I had found someone who truly valued and respected me. I leaned into him, our foreheads touching lightly, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against mine. "I trust you," I whispered, and in that instant, the last remnants of fear and doubt fell away. Together, We began envisioning a life built on honesty, respect, and shared dreams. No longer bound by deception, we were free to explore the depths of our connection, both personal and professional. The bond forged in adversity had blossomed into love, trust, and the certainty that, whatever challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. For the first time in months, I felt a quiet, radiant hope. The betrayal that had once threatened to shatter me had become the catalyst for my rebirth, and in Owen, I had found not only a protector and partner, but a true home for my heart. Months had passed since the storm of betrayal had hit. Caleb's termination and Amelia's reckoning were behind me, but the scars remained, not of regret, but of lessons learned, boundaries solidified, and resilience earned. Every time I walked into my newly secured office, organized and fully under my control, I felt a deep sense of ownership over my life. No one could manipulate me again. No one could use my loyalty as a weapon. Owen had been there every step of the way, not just as a strategist or protector, but as a constant, grounding presence. Over time, our professional partnership had naturally deepened into a personal one. We shared quiet mornings reviewing operations, evenings discussing possibilities, and nights simply enjoying the rare calm of trust and understanding. His respect for my autonomy never faltered, and the intimacy between us grew organically, unhurried, and profound. One evening, after a celebratory dinner marking the completion of all legal and professional closures, Owen and I took a walk along the river. The city lights shimmered on the water, and I realized how different life felt now, unburdened, clear, and full of possibilities. He slipped his hand into mine, and it felt as though we had both come home. "You know," he said softly, glancing at me with that calm intensity one had come to adore, "I've never met anyone as strong, as unflinching as you. You've taken everything that could have broken you and turned it into clarity, purpose, and love. And somehow, I get to be the one to share it with you." I smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "I've learned who I am, Owen. And I've learned who I can trust. You make me feel safe, not in the sense of protection from the world, but in the sense that I can be entirely myself, without fear. That's something I never had before." He stopped walking and turned to face me fully, his hands gently holding mine. "Then let's never let that go," he said, his voice quiet but unwavering. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." I felt a surge of love and gratitude. The betrayal, the chaos, the near destruction of my career and personal life, it had all been the catalyst for a profound rebirth. And now, standing with Owen, I realized I had not only reclaimed my life, but had found a partner who valued every part of me, my strength, my mind, my heart. That night, as we sat on a quiet bench overlooking the water, our hands intertwined, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The past shadows could no longer reach me. Caleb's lies, Amelia's duplicity, the emotional toxins I had endured, all of it had been swept away, leaving room for clarity, love, and stability. In Owen, I had found not just a partner, but an unwavering ally, a safe harbor, and the kind of love that wasn't contingent on deception or compromise. And for the first time in my life, I felt fully alive, fully trusted, and fully free. The road ahead was uncharted, but for the first time, I was walking it not with fear or doubt, but with confidence, love, and a heart open to all the possibilities life had to offer. Together, Owen and I would build a life defined by integrity, respect, and a deep, abiding passion that could withstand anything. And in that quiet moment, with the city reflecting its lights on the river, I knew I had truly been reborn.